As a young person, before I came to Christ, I was a party animal, I guess you might say it that way. I wasn't into drugs and drink and all that kind of stuff, but I sure didn't know how to party and get into that kind of stuff. Girls, chasing girls. I was an athlete in college, in high school. And so life that way just seemed to be a bag of fun. You're just into whatever. And then sometimes I think a little further about that. Not only it was a bag of fun, but there was also a darker side to that. I had my own share of tempers. Wasn't a guy to start a fight, but I sure wouldn't mind being in one. Okay, so if you decided you wanted to get into something, we glad to get into that. Just dance for a little while if you want to. So I had that kind of a temper. I wasn't going to back down from something. I wasn't going to de-escalate a situation. So I think about that. I'm like, well, I was kind of that guy, kind of had a violent nature to myself. But I was also into other little things. I could say that we were, and I say we because I was the group of guys that we ran pretty closely together. And so we found ourselves even being petty thieves. I could focus a lot on the fun side of what I was doing and forgetting there was this other side of me that lived in that world that was violent into different things like that. Not heavily, that's probably why, because it wasn't every day I'm into violent stuff, but I didn't have a problem with it. And what happened though is I moved out with two of my closer friends that we ran with. One of them decided he was going to go home. Just pack up and go home. So we're renting a place. How do you pack up and go home? And he called me one night. I was at the house and by myself, and he called one night and he said, hey, listen, he asked me a couple questions. One of those questions was, we're having a good time. I said, yeah, we're having a good time. Said, we've got all what we need. I said, yeah, I think we've got all that we need. Here, remember, I'm only like 17 or 18 at this point, getting ready to graduate from high school. And he's like, we got this, we've got that. I said, yeah, everything's pretty fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a good time. But then the question that hit me the most was, he then said, but if you were to die today, where would you go? When he asked that question, it wasn't like something I was unfamiliar with, to hear that. And he then just said, just think about that. I'll talk to you later. Hung up the phone. Now I'm at the house and it's running through my head. I don't know why it's running through my head at this point, but it is. He said, he said, I'm going to stay home and I'm going back to church. I'm going to give my life to the Lord. He didn't share the gospel with me in the deepness of it, but just in that. And he said, and then he hung up. And so for the rest of that night, I could not sleep worth anything. All I could think about was, where would I be going? I know the answers to this question, and I'm not completely certain that I'd be going anywhere close to heaven right now. Because again, growing up with it, you hear it. And for the first time, it's actually playing out in my head. This thought about heaven and hell. This thought about, where am I really? Because right now, as a young person, you're not even thinking anything can kill you. I'm healthy, so it's not a thought process. When one of my closest friends bounces this at me, I'm thinking, where did that come from? And now I'm up all night. Why'd you do that? You know what I mean? And that wasn't the moment that I changed and decided I was going to go and be saved. I continued in my efforts, doing my thing, having a good time. And I think it was the final straw was heading home at about 8 o'clock one morning with another close friend of mine. We both fell asleep at the wheel. I was driving, we fell asleep on our way home from partying all night. And when we woke up, we see this big retaining wall about 5 feet from us. We swing and we hit the wall, and the car comes to stop. No damage to the car, but we're fine. The thing that I think that blew my mind is that we crossed about 4 lanes of highway without any incident. So these things are starting to mount up, So I'm like, this question, this happens. I think when he asked that question, it was for the first time that, God is actually starting to show up and become more of a tangible experience for me. That I'm now having to really take this thing serious. This crossing the highway thing, and nothing happens to us, we survive it. It begs me to now question, who is he and what is this really about? And so it was shortly after that I decided, he'd been inviting me to church, so I finally decided I'll go with him to church. I knew about church. It wasn't foreign. I wasn't scared of church. It just wasn't something I was interested in, But when he invited me again, just after that incident, I was like, you know what? I'll just go. And it was going that began the process. It was shortly after that I would say, yeah, it's time to put up the dancing shoes my life to the Lord. And there we are.